Greetings and welcome to another edition of the Watchmen. We're just a couple of dudes sitting on the wall watching the world go by. Good evening, Checkmate. How's it going?
Oh, good evening. It's going well. We got a busy night in front of us.
We do have a busy night, and we're going to start as usual. Anytime we have news coming out of Jerusalem, Israel, the Middle East, we're going to start there. And specifically, Ramadan has ended, and we still have some violence taking place up on the Temple Mount at the Dome of the Rock. And last time we left, they were throwing rocks at Israeli police and then running into the Dome of the Rock for protection and also their stores of rocks, which they keep. Now, one of the things that we had discussed previously in a video, we were talking about for Ezekiel 38:39 to take place. Checkmate had excellently pointed out the idea that attitudes are probably going to need to change across the Transjordan area and to allow for the passage of Russia and friends to come into the region that will allow for a future invasion of Israel. And so this is something that Checkmate had seen during the week. Jordan demands total control, reduced Jewish presence on the Temple Mount. So the question I would pose is, are we watching the beginnings of attitudes changing in Jordan? And turn it over to the expert in the region. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we had in previous discussions, we had, especially this one that had just passed, I had gotten some information out of the region that the Jordanian Waqf, who are basically the custodians of the Dome of the Rock and the Temple Mount, and they also end up being entrusted with stewarding external access to some of the Christian holy sites on the Temple Mount, that the Waqf had basically gone missing when pandemonium broke out in the past 2 weeks. And now, of course, during Ramadan, you always expect a certain amount of difficulty on the Temple Mount. One of the things I had to correct is that when I got on a roll last week, I referred to the Waqf as provocateurs, if you will. That's not the case. They're the workers, although they kind of tend to assist the provocateurs, if for no other reason than to keep their own peace and being able to do their job when people finally get serious and clear the place out. Sort of political fence sitting on their Temple Mount responsibilities between what they're supposed to do and Israeli enforcement. And when Israeli enforcement is nil, they usually let scenes like you see in front of us right now play themselves out until the demonstrations burn out and the TV cameras go home. And usually it is when the TV cameras just pack up and leave that the protests stop, believe it or not. It's just the way it goes. Well, subsequent to that, the indications had been that the Waqf had been instructed to depart, implying that the Jordanians had an active role in precipitating these particular demonstrations and some of the storming that took place of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. And the storming of the Al-Aqsa Mosque, to prevent things like that from happening, that is the responsibility of the Waqf, which is entrusted to Jordan. Subsequent to that, and that was all when we did our last broadcast, that was all supposition based on a series of events that had happened that some friends in the region put together for me and sent me some raw thoughts that I regurgitated for the benefit of the viewers here. Subsequent to that, the Jordanian government began circulating a non-paper. A non-paper in Diplospeak is essentially, it's a set of points where it doesn't on the sheet say the position of this government is fill in the blank. It is a conceptual framework that is laid out in a number of points, and it is handed over from one diplomat to another. And it is usually verbally said, my government favors this. But the paper is designed so that if anybody were to show it to a TV camera, the government that handed the points over can say, oh, we didn't say that. That's not us. So it's called a non-paper. So it's a polite, it is a polite way of being able to get away with something in terms of communicating exactly what you want in writing, but without your name being attached to it. And the non-papers that went around the region said we need to return to a situation where the Waqf calls all of the shots on the Temple Mount, and that Israel's need to cease visiting only when the Waqf says it's okay, and this would apply to Christians as well. Essentially, the Jordanians is taking more control over the holy sites. At the very same time, it was getting noticed by other governments in the region that the Jordanians had a hand in this. So there is now a fissure in the wider region, and this is translating to things getting a little out of hand in wider Israeli society, likely because people are looking at the government in Jerusalem from around the region, and they're seeing a lot of weakness because politically it has been very paralytic in its ability to make and execute decisions.
Now,
that's
also,
all we advance.
Yeah, so with that, you'd also sent this tweet. This is from Adam Milstein. He's co-founder of Milstein, or at Milstein FF, American advocate and philanthropist. And his point is Palestinian terrorists never missing an opportunity to praise violence, sick, twisted glorification of today's attack on an Israeli security guard. And he created a link to a JerusalemPost.com, jpost.com article. Terror groups loud aerial heroic operation calling for escalating attacks. Now, the thing that you found interesting were the flags. And this would be something, for most of us here in the West, we don't have any idea what any of that stuff says or means. But with your experience, I know you had some comments on some of these flags and some of the things that it relates to.
Yeah, the notes that I got with it, because it really made a point that I would eventually cue into, but not up front. People over there, symbolism is a very big thing in the Middle East. The things that I cued in on, or that I would have eventually cued in on, were made plain for me. And from what I can tell, this is the note. From what I can tell, the green flags are Hamas. The red flags are PFLP, that's Popular Front for the Liberation of Palestine. The yellow flags are Az-Saika, which has been very little heard from in the past decade. But essentially, they are a PLO faction, Palestinian Liberation Organization, and they're closely associated with Assad in Syria. There is a restylized and perhaps hand-altered Jordanian flag also, and there's some mystery as to what that means. There was at one point a small Israeli flag, but only for burning. One of the ways that the Israelis have been able to keep order, this is Checkmate's opinion here again, for a long time over these various factions, is that the factions have generally followed either a political movement or more particularly the titular head of that movement, and they've been assigned to that personality and their ascent in politics vis-a-vis the Israel-Palestine issue. And the Israeli government has very effectively been able to take these fractious bunches and pick them apart on the fine points by essentially fomenting, if you will, internecine disagreements between the various factions. Well, in this picture, what you obviously see based on that note is they're really quite united. That's if the picture's worth 1,000 words, this is it, is that these fractious organizations have come together because they're sensing the moment of weakness on the part of the Israeli central government. And that plays itself out again in some of the wider violence and disturbances going on within the rest of the Israeli state.
And that was also that transitions nicely to a video that you had sent me, and I'm going to let you narrate this and explain this situation and why it's relevant to what you're talking about here.
Yeah, this is a group of Palestinian hotheads who went into a kibbutz, and kibbutzes in general are bastions of generally socialist, leftist. They have their roots in sort of Eastern emigre Israeli populations, primarily white with some sort of Marxist socialist residue on them. and that they sort of kludge together similar politics and, of course, Israeli or Jewish traditions that seem to, just converge into these little settlements. And so these Palestinians came into this kibbutz, and the irony here is that this kibbutz in particular, I am told, is a very left-leaning kibbutz. And here they are playing loud patriotic Palestinian music, acting like jerks, being towed around by their asses, literal asses. I mean, those are, from what I can tell, donkeys. They're being towed around, and you can see that gentleman right there is he's making a big deal about them needing to not be there. Really loud, sort of disturbing the peace, that kind of thing. You can see the gentleman is recording it. They get into a little bit of a verbal altercation here. The Palestinians make their point by flipping him off. That is the way, it's the left hand that Palestinian is showing the guy, and he's using the finger that you normally associate with doing your business in the John. And so, it's kind of, a pretty rude gesture over there. And so they're feeling very bold that they would just roll into a kibbutz, and and you can see the fence line of the kibbutz right there. There they are on the way out, and this kind of harassment is happening in various places in Israel. And you add on top of that the Israeli Arab population is now beginning to mobilize into vigilante and militia formations that are really disturbing the peace. So you see some issues that the Israelis have been putting off now that there's a premium being placed by the United States on Israeli-Palestinian peace, and some pretty non-committal positions taken by the State Department and the White House over where we stand in all of this, that this peace, and you overlay the Jordanian issue, this peace now has become once again the key regional distraction from the bigger issues that are in play in the region, and it's. I think the upshot to everything that I'm saying is this is between the Israeli central government being profoundly weak and American absenteeism in the region. This is really becoming once again a very big powder keg.
And with that, we're going to step out and broaden throughout the region. Let this thing reset here. And we're going to look at essentially from the United Arab Emirates over here in Dubai to Israel. And this has been taking place. This is per the Jerusalem Post, and I've seen this on some other outlets as well. 8 heavy transport aircraft belonging to the UAE landed in Israel in the past 2 weeks. And these are kind of, as I understand it, we are landing, we're not there very long, and we're taken back off again. And fascinating. It's a big deal. And what kind of thoughts and comments and intel are you hearing about this?
It's a big deal because it points to a wider syndrome in the region that the Emiratis and the Israelis seem to be fairly strong with reference to the Abraham Accords. They seem to be holding together pretty well in the face of the Iran deal, because both governments are opposed to the Iran deal. But the UAE, because they actually have to live with the Iran deal, and their diplomacy towards Iran is very pragmatic, although they want not a lot to do with that regime in particular, but they have a functional relationship with that regime. Both sides see where the United States has gone, and I think that the UAE sees themselves hooked to a falling star where the United States is concerned. So Israel, having the next most appreciable combat power and having good relations with the Israelis, they're tightening up that relationship. And you contrast that to the Saudis, who are really exploring a lot of avenues diplomatically that are far different.
And that kind of dovetails into Ezekiel 38, as we're going to bring the Saudis into the equation, specifically Ezekiel 38:13, Sheba and Dedan. That's those ancient persons occupy what is currently modern day Saudi Arabia. And they kind of stand by and just watch as Russia, Turkey, Iran, and friends will look to invade Israel from the north. And everybody understands it's for economic reasons. Have you come to see spoil? Have you assembled your host to carry off plunder, take away silver, gold, livestock, goods, to seize great spoil? Now, arguably, that great spoil is going to be natural gas resources in the Mediterranean. Well, and then this happens this week out of nowhere, and this guy remains a absolute wild card, unpredictable to understand for me personally. Turkey President Recep Erdogan decides, I'm going to go see the Saudis, and he makes his first visit to the Arabian Peninsula since 2017. Now, keep in mind, he sees himself as kind of the caliphate of the Islam world for the vast majority of the Sunni Islam or Sunni Muslims, and he ultimately wants control of the religious sites in Saudi Arabia. But nonetheless, he makes a trip to go see the Saudis. Boy, there's a lot to unpack here. I'm going to turn it over to you and let you have fun with it.
Yeah, I mean, you zeroed in on this picture earlier of the greeting, and when you meet Bedouin Arabs, you know, and you're a man, they're a man, and they hold you, you're their guest in their kingdom. When you come in for the greeting, it gives a whole new meaning to bring it in for the real thing, because, you know, you're about to get two big, wet, sloppy smacks on both cheeks when they greet you. It's just a fact of life. I had to go through it. It's just the thing you do when they welcome you. You don't demur from it. It's insulting. And then when they take you in for this, when they take you in for the when they take you in for the celebratory meal, they will take you by your right hand as if you're boyfriend, girlfriend, and walk you in there. You know, in our culture, it's effeminate, and theirs, it's respectful and a warm way to welcome somebody and let them know that you're a guest in their home and they want to be attentive to you. This, in combination with what I said in the last video about the Saudis looking to go their own way with respect to oil sales in yuan, and we'll talk about energy sales in regional currencies again in a little bit, but this is indicative of what happens when you truly insulted the Saudis, when from their vantage point, they've been there for us quite a bit, and they feel that they have been used and disregarded. The king there has been in a very fragile position. I think that he is looking to reconcile a lot of relationships that have had some hostility. It's an open secret that the Saudis killed Khashoggi, who is a Turk at their embassy in Turkey. It's an open secret that they did it. They make no apologies for it, because what Khashoggi was attempting to do was he was working with the clerics in Mecca and Medina to orient them more toward Erdogan. And this may have been the kiss and make up discussion with Erdogan and the Saudis in an effort to try to draw the two closer. Because even though Erdogan generally screws up everything he touches, he's got his finger in a lot of pies throughout the region. He's had a couple of decent diplomatic moments in Russia, Ukraine. I think he sees the détente. They see the détente between Turkey and Russia, and I think this is the Saudis attempting to get ahead of the ball. But more importantly, in the face of what may be cooking with Iranian breakthroughs of its own in terms of its own situation, is that they're trying to hedge their bets. This is not something that people should look at and say, oh, they've teamed up and they're good friends forever. It does not work that way in the Middle East. There was a saying at the State Department, you never buy an Arab, you only rent him. Relationships such as what you see on the screen now are a transient phenomena, but they're important to mark because, once again, it goes to the issue of American absenteeism.
Also speaks to me, Erdogan, Turkey are desperate for financial backing. They need money. Their currency's getting wrecked. And he also spends a lot of time down here talking about, I see and believe that it is in our joint interest to boost our cooperation with Saudi Arabia in such areas as healthcare, energy, food security, agricultural technologies, defense industry, and finance. It seems that we have significant potential, particularly in renewable and green energy. Okay, whatever. We will hopefully discuss and thoroughly evaluate these ideas. I mean, so it's clearly for economic purposes, which speaks to, again, going back to our prophecy in Ezekiel 38. That's why they go in there. That's why Russia goes in there. It's because of economic issues, and that's what's on the table when these two got together. And then you look at the distance. Here's Iran, and then we previously covered the UAE, how close they are. They're just across the bay. They're across the Gulf, and then we have this with Iran getting their nose in the middle of it.
Yeah, this one got my attention. It also got my blood boiling because it always begins with Mossad said to foil a plot by IRGC. The Mossad they're good at what they do, but they tend to take an awful lot of credit for other people's moves. And a lot of this and a lot of the strategic paralysis in Israel is that in the United States, what this administration has running in the background that scares the life out of them, and they don't want to acknowledge, they can't dignify it in the media, is the John Durham investigation. In Israel, there's a major investigation that is going on right now involving possibly elements of the Mossad, elements of the Shin Bet, which is their domestic security outfit. They handle things domestically, what the Mossad handles internationally. And a company called NSO Group that was an instrument of blackmail to security services, not just in Israel, but all over the planet. They got involved in surveilling the Likud party. And this government in Jerusalem right now, many of the members of it have very dirty hands in it. So whenever you see a headline that begins with Mossad has done, they're shooting down satellites with BB guns, the Mossad is. Whenever you hear that sort of thing, it's them trying to shore up their image that they are still useful and they are still serving Israeli interests faithfully. Yeah, I'm sure that most rank and file Mossad members are there for God and country, but the fact of the matter is that the running backdrop to this is, why did this come out now? Why does it emphasize an Israeli diplomat in Turkey as well as an American general officer in Germany? Well, it's obvious within the story itself. They're trying to accomplish a couple of things. Number one, the IRGC is still at it. So America, please don't do the Iran deal. That they are going after American targets, much like has been said about Brian Hook, formerly with the State Department, and Mike Pompeo, the former Secretary of State. And at the same time, they are attempting to keep the relationship with Turkey that has been somewhat rekindled warm, but show it to be a cautious warmth. And so those are the things that are at play in this, is that how an article like this really is oriented toward domestic consumption in Israel, even though, of course, we're looking at an English translation from the Times of Israel.
And then, our good friends at the IRGC, we've spent a lot of time talking about just the tentacles and the reach that they have across the Middle East region. And then you found this article, and this fella, now help me out with this. He's associated with Hezbollah. Is that correct?
This started off as a DEA sting operation of the Sinaloa cartel. And what ended up happening is that the DEA informant, it appears, had a mythical, sizable quantity of cocaine that needed to go into another market because I think the story that they teed up with Sinaloa was look, that, our deal went bad. We're stuck with this product that we can't move. We're looking for an alternative venue. And Mr. Fahey of the British Virgin Islands was told that, look, we own this guy, so throw him a couple $100,000, he'll let you pass through his territory with no problems. And so he got jammed up in this. And what's interesting is that it doesn't just speak to political corruption. I think that's just a major bonus. Whoever at DEA managed to land this one just said, I just secured my next 2 promotions out of this. But the fact that it was a big name takedown in the British Virgin Islands, I find that kind of an interesting aside. Wherever you can nail official corruption, by all means, take it out. But what I found interesting was that it was Hezbollah and the Sinaloa cartel. If you don't think the rat lines of terror through the southern border exist, they are very much alive, and this is one of the pieces of proof. And the reason why I favor having this alongside the IRGC is, as you and I were talking about offline, Paul, is that in my research outside of government, and I won't go into inside of government, but the one inescapable conclusion I reached is that these Islamic terror organizations, the further they get from the region, the more they cooperate with each other. So the idea that you can take part of the IRGC off the terrorism watch list for the deal means that there are redundancies for their international skullduggery. You take the IRGC off there, and sort of you're just allowing them to shore up a little more of what they do as an organization abroad. If they were to remain on there, they would just run it through Hezbollah, and yeah, that means a steeper cut of the proceeds go to the Lebanese Hezbollah people as opposed to Iranian Revolutionary Guard proper. But nevertheless, the fact is that both of these organizations are really international criminal syndicates who engage in terror as their avocation.
Yeah, that's one thing that really struck me with this whole thing is don't kid yourself. These folks over there in the Middle East, and they're I know they have some ties with Venezuela, that, like you're talking about, in reaching into Mexico, British Virgin Islands. I mean, they want to get over here and disrupt things. And
there was a fellow who was a Venezuelan diplomat who was actually Lebanese, Shiite Lebanese by extraction. Whenever you hear Venezuela and Shiite Lebanese, you should immediately go to Hezbollah, who was extradited to the United States last year. And he's sitting in a lockup down in Miami. Now, whether he's cooperating or not, I don't know, and the government's certainly not going to say that. But he had the goods. He was nailed in the Cape Verde Islands off the coast of Africa. He was held there by the Cape Verde Island authorities until the extradition was able to be arranged. And I can't help but think that maybe this has something to do with that the DEA is trying to clear up the rat lines. DEA has a history that is not problem free. But when I'm looking at the arrests that they've gotten, such as this, and more recently some of the equipment in Afghanistan that was about to get sold onto the market for big dollars, there was a huge buy that was about to go down by the Japanese Yakuza in Southeast Asia to go to drug cartels there for their security forces, their private security forces in the Golden Triangle. And it was DEA that led it. It wasn't the CIA. It wasn't the FBI. It was DEA. Those people have a very can-do attitude in that small agency.
Very good. That's great stuff. And with that, we're going to make a shift to happenings between Russia and Ukraine, and specifically some of the economics. Checkmate teased this earlier. Russia's Gazprom cutting off gas supplies to Poland, Bulgaria for refusing to pay in rubles. And then, subsequently with that, they took it a step further. And now we have, this is from Financial Times, what we now know as the, quote, Rublezone. And these are the countries that are willing to pay for natural gas from Russia in payment. They will pay in rubles to Russia because, one, they want their energy. and that'd be Germany, Austria, Hungary, and Slovakia. And I know you had some thoughts on this. We were talking about this before we put this together, and just the logistics of this and the management of this.
Yeah, what you're looking at there are basically the countries by which a lot of this natural gas coming out of the Caspian Basin, Central Asia, and Russia has to transit through. And there are a number of brokers in there that actually marry the transactions from their point of origin to their customers in Germany, the Low Countries, France, even the UK. The brokerages are generally set up in Austria and Hungary, and they do transit Slovakia, which is the other country in red right there. And again, the Ezekiel 38-39 context to all of this is that the Russians have really been shoring up their position in natural gas in spite of U.S. sanctions, and this is where the Biden administration once again dropped the ball because they were playing to the headlines and not to actual strategic effect with the sanctions that they made. That now they said, you're going to pay us in rubles. And all we really did in the long run was strengthen the Russian economy because they are less at the mercy of the international financial system because they're falling back on their own currency. The Ezekiel 38-39 tie-in is that if you're strengthening the Russian energy sector, if by accident that it has its own isolated currency functioning its own economic fishbowl outside of the rest of the world, they're in a little bit of a stronger position in the long run when they recover from this Ukrainian debacle to call the shots with more authority. Because once the Russians find something that works for them, they're going to stick with it. So the Ezekiel 38-39 tie-in is that, remember, a lot of this natural gas from the east to the west is with Europe as the destination. The Israelis are the only real viable threat to Russian energy dominance in this sphere. So the fact that you have weak sister countries in Europe who happen to house not just the client base but the brokers who are willing to do business in ruble, it shows you that the financial position of Tarshish, I guess, is representative
of
Europe, is really starting to falter. It's showing Tarshish, as the prophecy says, to be that much weaker because all of that rich energy is still sitting there in the Eastern Mediterranean off the Israeli shore.
I think that also speaks to why they stand around and they really don't want to do anything because at the core of it, they still need to have energy. They got to have their energy needs met. So they're not about to step in when Russia goes to conquer again for energy purposes. All Tarshish, loosely Tarshish, Western Europe, cares about is, at this point, they don't want to freeze out. They can see what's going to be coming, say 6 months from now, because they have no energy, any energy in storage currently. And I think that's a very accurate assessment of that situation. I always wondered, well, why would Tarshish and the Saudis just kind of stand by and do nothing when you got a hostile invasion getting ready to take place? Well, one, they're politically weak, and then two, they need energy and they don't want to freeze. I don't think it's any more complicated than that. And the scenario you laid out right there.
Yeah.
And then in the mix of all that, we get this, and this was I saw this on multiple news agencies. Now I grabbed this article. I thought it was the most comprehensive. I'm a big fan of the folks at the Daily Mail in the UK. Vladimir Putin will undergo cancer operation in the near future and is set to hand over power to hardline ex-KGB chief while he is incapacitated, insider claims. Hit the highlights here. One, from a health standpoint, Putin has cancer. I've seen it to be, quote, abdominal cancer of some sort. They don't get specific. Parkinsonisms and schizophrenic symptoms related to the Parkinsonisms. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. The main thing is, I wanted to look at this also from the standpoint of who he would be handing power over to. FSB chief Nikolai Patrushev. And what kind of thoughts? What's your understanding of who he is and what his makeup is?
Well, Patrushev and Putin came up in the FSB. FSB, people equate it to the FBI. It's not really. It's more. It's hard to believe given how inglorious the FBI has made itself in recent times. It's more repressive than that. They're really the Department of Dirty Tricks in Russia. And FSB stands for Federalnaya Sluzhba Bezopasnosti. And it's just the Federal Security Service is what that translates to. Patrushev will do as exactly what Putin would have wanted him to do. They came up together. Patrushev owes his headship of the FSB to Putin, but he's not Putin. Patrushev runs the organization. Putin calls the overall shots. So he will likely not really make any changes to what Putin has been doing. Putin, I'm sure, gave him a set of marching orders. Look, here are the things I want done. Make it happen while he's going under the knife. Patrushev also is loyal enough and a creature enough of Putin that if anything were to happen to Putin, either in surgery or if somebody were to do away with him, Patrushev would unlikely to be very long for this world, because what makes the Putin surgery, what makes people sit on the edges of their chairs, is that Putin built an order in Russia that only Putin can run. That even though the organization or the group of people that Putin is in charge of, the faction, if you will, it's called the Siloviki. And the Siloviki basically are the top bureaucrats of all the security agencies outside the military. So in the American construct, that would be like the most senior people at the FBI, the State Department, and the CIA running the U.S. government. And that's the group Putin belongs to. You have a very angry, disempowered Russian military right now who believes their leadership has failed them, not the general officers as much as the civilian leadership. You have oligarchs who are very nervous about their positions among foreign banks that are wondering what Putin has gotten them into. And you've got the street gangs of Russia who really do the big dirty work, and they're the ones who Russian army in the streets versus the Russian street gangs. That's not even a fair fight. The street gangs win every time. These large organized criminal syndicates, they're also basically, they have a deal. And so the oligarchs as a center of power, the gangs as a center of power, they have fealty to Putin, the man, not Putin's class of people. So Patrushev is really kind of hanging out there, and probably he's burning up a lot of prayer time, hoping that Putin will pull through.
And so I want to get into Putin's health. And so I want to frame these as we look at this video here of Putin getting ready to meet, I believe it's President of Belarus. For those of you who don't know, I'm a healthcare professional. I'm a speech pathologist, close to 30 years, and I've worked primarily with adult geriatric patients. So when I see this is just through the eyes of somebody who does this on a daily basis. By no means am I diagnosing, but I will tell you folks, this is very consistent. The gait, how he walks, the little trimmer there on the right side with his hand. Looks like he's the rigidity. This is consistent with patients I've worked with who have Parkinson's. That's what it looks like to me. Now, am I diagnosing and saying Vladimir Putin has Parkinson's? No, I'm not. But I will tell you, it's very consistent. The gait pattern, what you're seeing exhibited there physically, is consistent with someone who has Parkinson's. Now, that's Checkmate. Did you have any comments on this video?
Not on the video itself, but the fact that Putin's been sick for a little while has been a bit of an open secret in Washington. You saw at the outset of the Ukraine war, there were a lot of talking heads, a former this or that of a great mind going on TV and saying, well, Putin's maybe sick in the head. I remember very vividly Condoleezza Rice saying something typically vapid about that very same thing. And it wasn't that he was sick in the head. The guy knew what he was doing. He's still shrewd. It was just that he did have health problems, and a lot of people knew it. And you're showing more videos that kind of substantiate that. And I'll sort of kick that back to you. But it's been known that he hasn't been doing well.
Yeah, and this is, I think, probably a cleaner version of that picture, and they edited some things out. But a lot of the fidgeting of the feet, as I'm looking at this, I'm focusing on Putin's right side. To me, that's the side that seems to be a little bit more affected. He may be doing some things to distract you from that right side with what he's doing on his left side. But I want to pass this one along too. This was one that really jumped out with me because, again, clinically, I work with a lot of folks with Parkinson's, and one of the issues that they have frequently with this population as Parkinson's progresses, is folks will have some difficulties with drooling. And I'm watching a man who's trying to manage drooling. That's just what I see. Licking his lips, and it's drooling to me is either a tongue function or a lip function type of thing. I would, just watching this, I'm not severe by any means. He's using a compensatory strategy. He's aware that it could happen to him, and he's probably just trying to make sure that saliva doesn't creep out of his mouth because he knows he's under camera, and keeping the moisture, the saliva under control, if you will. This picture to me speaks volumes. And again, I'm going to focus on Putin. Notice the right hand. That's just a grip technique. And if you watch any time Putin is speaking, he has his right hand attached to something, and I'm of the opinion that is to manage tremors. And again, we can look at the video of this, and again, focus to me on the right side, what he's trying to manage now. And also, now we were talking before we started this. You had some thoughts about Shoigu as well.
Yeah, Defense Minister Shoigu is rumored. They say he had a heart attack. You and I kind of kicked the ball back and forth. I defer to you on it, but he's not holding up well either because he is a defense minister for a president that's put him in a very difficult position with respect to the Russian military. Again, drawing on my comments that I laid down before about the power dynamics of Russia, if Putin doesn't make it while the Russian army is in the field, don't think for a second that this is going to be an indication that peace and happiness are going to be upon us all. A strong man like Putin in Russia, when he dies, things get extremely dicey in Moscow.
And the one thing too, I did listen to this speech, and it was all in Russian. So I, as far as being able to understand Russian and listen to the subtleties of the articulation of the language, I'm not going to pick up on that. And it didn't sound over the top to me as far as slurring from either one of these guys. Now, people who are in tune with that, who understand the nuances of articulation with Russian, they may pick that sort of thing up. Now, again, mild in my estimation. This was one, we talked about this one off camera as well. If you always notice, I'm going to focus on the right side. That right hand's anchored to something, and they're very clever to edit that out so that you don't see it. But his right hand, most of the time when he's talking, he's not gesturing with it. He's hanging on to something. He's not at risk for falling down, I don't think. But it's just something to watch with him. Again, I'm of the opinion it's something consistent with Parkinson's. There's also Lewy body dementia. They spoke initially up here at the top with, I think the phrase was, quote, schizophrenic symptoms. Now, a lot of times with those two different progressions, you'll have some hallucinations, also some spatial awareness things, from a standpoint of like spatial awareness. The best example I can give, and I'm convinced President Clinton, when Hillary was nominated a few years ago and they let the balloons out on the stage, Bill's up there trying to poke the balloons and he couldn't hit them. He just couldn't hit the balloons. And that's what I talk about when I mean spatial awareness, like that ability, the depth perception to be able to pull off just a simple physical skill. That would be something as a consideration to just keep an eye on. So, and again, I could be all wet. I mean, I'm looking at a few snippets. They're well controlled. I haven't been able to sit down in front of this guy and spend time with him. So I clearly can't diagnose it. But what I will say is that those symptoms are consistent with somebody going through Parkinson's or a Parkinson's type progression. So time's going to tell. We'll see. Do you have any other?
I think that to go back to Ezekiel 38 and 39, the language in the prophecy itself about prophesy against Gog of Magog. My sense of things is that is God using a job title, if you will, not necessarily a person is being identified so much as an individual sitting in that office at that time. It's sort of like Lucifer's job title is Satan. That's not his proper name. So when we talk about Gog of the land of Magog, the chief prince of Meshach, and that goes on to, of course, other regions. But I think that what it's really oriented on is the Russian presidency and not so much the man. So if Putin, happens to pass during this episode, the words you see here are divine and eternal. It really has no impact there, but I think that makes a little more sense of it, because I know that oftentimes we say, well, Putin this and Putin that with respect to Israel. Well, yeah, but he's also at the same time the Russian president.
Absolutely. That's an excellent point. And that's one thing to, I hear a lot of this and I get feedback in regards to this topic from people who listen to these, watch these, follow the situation. Or not everybody. Many people say, I hear people say, if Putin could just go away, this would all be better. And I would caution people out there. The recent history of this world, as we've watched these things happen with, quote, regime change across the Middle East and different leaders leaving power and another one assuming power, recent history, in watching it, somebody usually ascends to power and they're more radical than the one who just left place. And by no means am I saying, oh, Putin's a choir boy or whatever, but it's like, be careful what you wish for, because there may be some other folks out there in Russia who have more ambitious ideas about how they want to run things. So I just think, especially in the time we're living in, I've learned this many times over. It's unpredictable. We know how it ends, but the path it takes is unpredictable.
And this is another case of God sees the end from the beginning. How we get there, that's it's the glory of kings to search it out, and that's what the Watchmen, the two of us are doing. We're just searching it out.
And that'd be, and frankly, if we knew all the details of how we got there, we probably wouldn't believe it. You're telling me this is going to happen? Crazy stuff. We're going to transition off of Russia. Now, we're going to tease this. We're going to dig into this a little deeper. And this is a topic. No, fires at food processing plants have not been set intentionally. We're going to dig into this, and I think it does merit some investigation. I chose this article because, of course, the fact checkers have looked into it, and they've determined, no, that is false. People are not setting food processing plants on fire intentionally.
This is where I'm going to give credit to another internet personality who hopefully watches the Watchmen. We don't know. But Dan Bongino says, if the fact checkers say it's wrong, it's right. And the other thing is, I'll quote another internet personality, Steve Bannon, and I'll say, there may not be a conspiracy, but there are no coincidences either. And so, I think that we at my behest, we decided to tease this because this is making the rounds in the news, and this is not one of those things that Checkmate would recommend going out and digging the bunker right now. Although if you do, hey, call me up and let me come over and let me take a look at your work. But I think it is worth considering the alarming number of industrial quote unquote accidents that are happening at food processing plants, which are not known for having those. Each time you go to the store, you don't have to make a big deal of it, but each time you go to the store, take a couple of bucks, buy an extra bag of rice, an extra bag of beans as a just-in-case supply. Because with the exception of anything oriented on China, a lot of these supply chains are resilient. There's just a lag time in getting them to catch up. It's not the time to press the panic button. But when you look at what we just covered with respect to Russia and Ukraine, we are looking at a food shortage in the world. And the last thing we need is one in North America to go along with the one that's about to hit the Middle East, which, we went into the Erdogan meeting in Saudi Arabia. They see it coming too.
Absolutely. That's one of the things he's prepping for with the Saudis. You bet.
Yeah, that's right. Because he's gonna get the brunt of it. Erdogan is gonna catch the brunt of the food crisis when it hits. I'm not quite sure when the Ukrainian-Russian harvesting season is done, but that's another plus 4 weeks after that's done before it starts hitting the shelves in Turkey.
July. That process starts in July from the stuff I've looked into. So what are we? So May, June, July, 2-3 months out?
Yeah. So you're going to have a lot of global corporations that are going to be looking for where they're going to get the most money. What I would say to the viewers out there is now's not the time to panic. If you got the money to buy emergency rations, fine. Go on with your bad self. I think they taste terrible. You can get plenty of decent non-perishables that'll get you through whatever shortages happen.
Right. I think that's very well put. And it's like if you got just spend an extra $5 to $10 every time you go to the grocery store, buy some things like pastas, beans, grains, oats, stuff that's going to keep, and just canned goods. One thing I will say before we move off of this topic, 18 plants have caught fire in the last 6 months. It is what it is. And they list them. There they all are. Sometimes they have planes flying.
Check it and they list it so that you can see for yourself. There's a little more of this. Yeah.
Now, whether or not they were done on purpose, believe that we'll dig into that later. We got planes flying into some of these things, boiler explosions, summer accidents, whatever. But it is happening. Don't kid yourself. It is happening.
In a subsequent Watchmen.
It is happening. And we're going to close with a little lighthearted humor. This is from Iran practicing for anti-Israel propaganda video. Notice the technique. Oh, we're going to keep this on roll so we get several looks at this. One, the cross-handed technique. This guy swinging the baton there clearly has no baseball experience. He'd get a little more pop if he'd change that grip around. He's a lefty. But this little fella there takes the direct shot. We'll take a look at him. We're going to run through this again. Checkmate, do you have any analysis you want to provide from this situation?
This episode of The Watchmen is brought to you by Beavis and Butthead.
That's right. That's one thing we commented. There's just something about another man getting hit in the junk there that it's funny as long as it's not you.
Exactly. It's funny because it's not happening to us.
That's right. And he's standing there in all ready position. We're going to have to look at this again. But I like the guy. He's got his hands bracing himself, hands behind the head. He's ready, taking it. Other guy, he wasn't prepared. So.
Yeah, and, there's nothing like watching. There's nothing like watching fake tough guys humiliate themselves. It's always gratifying.
Oh, this guy in the green shirt, like he's teeing it up on a tee ball when he starts it out. Yep, he got her done. He doesn't even know he's done anything to the other guy.
And then they shook hands afterwards. It's great.
Successful propaganda. Well done. With that, we will close this episode of The Watchmen. I'm sure we'll be back again. There's all kinds of stuff happening. very quickly around this planet of ours. And again, thanks for watching The Watchmen, just a couple of dudes sitting on the wall watching the world go by. Thanks a lot. Take care.
God bless you, gang. Thanks for tuning in.
Take care.